Okay, so to install PrimeNG, or rather get the package for your application, you'll need to go to your terminal and use the command npm install to get the package. The command will be npm install PrimeNG. Okay, once you have PrimeNG installed, we'll need to go back to the angular.json file and make sure that the relevant files have been added to our build sequence. So back under the styles, we'll need to have a couple different things. First, we'll need to have the PrimeNG icons. And to make sure that those are installed, let's see. Actually, we still need to install PrimeNG's icons package. So also do npm install prime icons, and this will provide the icon set for PrimeNG. So now, yes, as we're continuing, PrimeNG and then PrimeNG icons.css will be needed. Additionally, we'll also need to have a couple theme files from PrimeNG. So node modules, PrimeNG, resources, PrimeNG.css, and let's just copy that over and say themes Nova Lite /theme.css. Now, if we restart the compiler, a word of caution, it's always good to make sure that after such changes, things are working. For example, right now, as you saw, after we redid this, the table isn't loading all the different rows. So let's check that out. Okay, so once we refresh the page, the table did load all the rows, so it seems we don't need to worry for now. And now what we're going to do is explore using PrimeNG's table component to create the table here. This is where you start to see the advantages of having components in all these external libraries. In this case, PrimeNG already provides a lot of functionality such as pagination, doing filtering, sorting, everything for the table right within the table component. So that's less work that we would need to do in our implementation. To use PrimeNG's table component, I'm going to show you the PrimeNG website, and from there, how to use the component. All right, so that would be the table component is located under the data section. You just go to table, and here's what a very generic table might look like. What it suggests is we need to import the table module, so we'll need to make sure we import into our app module, and after that we can start coding like this. We use the p-table DOM element, and the value would be whatever list of data we want to display. So in this case, it's going to be a list of bars. The reason why value is surrounded by brackets, square brackets, is it's for something called data binding. So whenever the data changes on the script side, or the JavaScript TypeScript side, we want Angular to automatically detect the change and reflect it into our HTML that's being rendered. All we're really doing is defining a template, and then Angular handles the rendering. In this case, it's going to be for cars. we have one template here for having the header, which is going to be at the very top for each column. And then, of course, the body, where we say let dash and then some temporary variable similar to a for each loop or the ng4 directive that we used before. And then we can use that reference within the HTML here. This is for the syntax provided by Angular. Okay, so to get started on using PrimeNG's table component, we'll need to first import the table module. So import from PrimeNG table table module, and then we can say table module here. Next we can start to use it, so table module with a value of bars. We can have ng template. Here, I'll just put this to the side so that way I'll be able to see what I'm coding. Now for this, we can just take the example we had here. We don't need to keep doing the work over and over. And we can get rid of this scope column. And we'll also get rid of the number column. That's not really necessary, I think. Now, for the body, it needs a p-template body attribute, and then we can say let dash bar to reference each individual bar for the rows. And we won't need this ng4 directive that we had previously. Instead, it will just be provided as bar. And now we can get rid of our original table code. Okay, so let's see what our table looks like here now. Okay, so it seems like we're missing something. We have NaN extra column, and here's the culprit. We forgot to get rid of the number column in the body. Okay, so now we have PrimeNG's table component, and what you notice is there's not any space below, so let's just add a couple break tags. 2 should be good enough, and at the very bottom we'll have that extra gap so everything looks a little bit nicer there. And with that, we are now using PrimeNG's table component. We provide the value or the list of elements and then a template for the header and body. Everything else will be handled from there using PrimeNG. But let's say you wanted to view the details on what each bar actually has. Perhaps what the bar is selling, or just get information for the bar. Well, we already have a query that we implemented previously, where if you request with the name of the bar in the URL, then it will return the information for just one bar, or an error if the bar is not found. Now, to do that, we'll need to add another method to the service. So bars.service.ts, we can say get bar, bar string, and then return this dot HTTP. with API slash bar slash plus bar. And we can start using it right here. So the first thing we would need to do is create a page for, or a view for that specifically bar view, or the bar details. So to do that, we'll need to use the Angular CLI again. We'll say ng generate. This is going to be another component, and we'll call it bar details. Okay, now within the bar details component, there's not much here right now. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that whenever a bar name gets clicked, we want to be able to redirect to that page with the details for just that bar. So if I were to click Blue Angel, then it should take me to a specific page for Blue Angel. And since we create the bar details page, we'll want to redirect there. So let's go to the routing and add that route. Again, make sure that the bar details component has an import line at the top of this file. As you can see, no changes so far, but we're working on it. One additional change we'll make right now is actually this welcome component is going to be with another URL called bars, because it makes sense. The welcome page is actually a list of bars, and we'll have another route, which is the default route. And what we're going to say is just, for the default route, redirect to bars. So if you visit here, it actually takes you here. And after that, if you have a slash and then some name for a bar, then we'll actually go to the bar details component, which means it'll be that page. Now, from within the welcome page, we need to actually make sure that when someone clicks on the name over here, they go to the detail for that page. So we're going to transform this into an anchor element or anchor tag. And for ref, we're just going to say bars slash, and then we'll plug in the name for the bar over here. Alternatively, instead of doing all of this, there's another way. Instead of using the href attribute, we can use the router link. And within here, same idea. This is actually a directive provided by Angular's router, and what it allows us to do is redirect using the internal Angular router rather than going all the way out to the browser and then going from there. Now we'll need to make sure that the anchor tag has the bar name over there. Alright, now when we hover, you'll see that we have the clickable cursor, and if we try to visit this, it takes us to a new view, and it says bar details works. If we check here, there it is. So now we'll need to figure out a way to get what name was actually included into the URL on the UI. Because if we don't know the name, we can't request against a specific name. So to do that, go into the component and we'll need to import a couple things. The first thing we'll need is the activated route component or service. So activated route from Angular router. And then we'll need to also have the bars service again. And of course the bar. After that, just like within the welcome component, where one moment. Just like within the welcome component, you'll need to go into the constructor and have the bar service. But this time we'll also be including another service, the activated route, which we'll just call route. And now within the constructor, we can use that. So route param map subscribe. Oh, not that. We'll create a variable called param map, which we're going to use, and I'll surround it over here. Yeah, in TypeScript and in Angular, I really heavily use arrow functions, and I think that's something really valuable. You guys should definitely learn that, by the way. Now, for the param map, we can say this dot bar name equals param map dot get bar, because when you go back to the app.routing module or app-routing, we put bar here. So that's going to be the name. And let's create this bar name, which is a string. And now, if we were to go into the CSS, we can say just bar name. Let's check it out. I clicked on Blue Angel, so it says Blue Angel. If I go back and click on Cabana, it says Cabana. All right, so with that, we can now get the name of the bar, which we can also use to get the details for that bar. So service.get bar, and it will be for get this dot bar name, and we'll subscribe on that to say whatever the response data is, set another variable called bar details to be that response. So bar details equals the data. And otherwise, we're going to need to say for some error, which we'll get as a HTTP response, let's make sure, yep, it's Angular common HTTP. And we'll say it's of type any, really. If the error status is 404, so this is actually a triple equals, something like saying equals equals equals, to make sure that the value is the same and the type is the same. In JavaScript, I highly recommend you use triple equals, just to avoid any special quirks from the language. And yeah, so if the error status is 404, we're just going to say alert bar not found. Otherwise, we can print to the console some error, which will be error.status, and then we'll need to do a dash, after which we can say error.body. And that should get us the message from the body. And of course, after that, we can say an error occurred on the server. Please check the console. Or browser console. Well, okay. And we forgot a semicolon here. So there's the semicolon. So now, if I were to say bars slash some random stuff, it should say bar not found, and that's that. Okay. So now let's go to some random page for a random bar in our system, and we'll make sure that the details get printed here. So we'll start by having a jumbotron just like the one we had before. In bar details component.html, we'll have bar name, and then bar details.address, bar details.phone, and we're going to start having this. So this ngIf and the star, it's another directive from Angular, which basically provides a conditional statement for this DOM element. If this expression within the quotes is false, then this DOM element won't be rendered. Otherwise, it will be. So if bar details is defined, which is the same as just saying bar details, then we should render this. Meaning, if there are details, let's show them. If not, then what's the point? And this question mark provides a guard, so that way if bar details is null or undefined, then we never get to doing .adder and having a null pointer exception. That's the same idea over here, except what I'm doing is saying bar details.address and bar details.city should both be there. If both of them are there, then I will put this pipe or a vertical bar, and then also show the city. So that way it looks nice. It shows the address, and then if there's the address and the city, then there needs to be a separator in the middle. And after that, the phone number for the bar. Okay, let's see how this looks. Okay, so for Blue Tattoo, we have the name, and once that request came in, we saw this. That's why there was a lag. And now we can see the details for the bar. If we go to some other bar, then we can see the details for that as well. So for Cabana, it should be 1200 California Avenue, San Francisco, which is there. And if there was a phone number attached with the bar, then we would see that as well. So I think for Headley Club, no. Well, you know, there's one way to show the phone number. Let's go back to the welcome component and just show the phone number. So let's copy this over and say phone. And over here, we'll need to have a phone column. All right. So now, yeah, Britannia Arms has a phone number, Club 175. Let's check this, and here you go. Since it doesn't say California for Club 175, we didn't see that. Yeah, the address field here is blank, and it's just city. So just says San Francisco. For something like Gecko Grill, we would not have the phone number though. And yeah. So that's how you use the PrimeNG table and also have a service along with having a URL parameter, which you can pick up using the param map from the activated route service. With that, now you see how you can show errors if there are any errors in your application and how to get the data. The next step will probably be to filter your table right here, and additionally also start to have more information such as filtering by beers, showing the menu for each bar and things like that. Now I'm going to forward a little bit and just have all the code already included in the server for getting the menu for a given bar. So the list of all the beers which each bar sells. Okay, so here are some of the changes I've made. I added a menu route, a couple other routes to get the beer manufacturers, which beer might be manufactured by whom, things like that. Some additional routes for getting information for each drinker, and also just which bars sell a certain beer and things like that. It's typically the same stuff as what we've already done, so I would highly encourage you to look at the code rather than me going over each detail of that. Queries, on the other hand, might get a little more complicated, such as finding which bars sell certain beer and doing getting the menu for each bar, where we start to do joins. Okay, so on this side, on the UI, we'll now need to have a service for other things, such as which drinker, all the information for that and everything else. But first, let's continue with getting the menu for a given bar. So get menu, we'll go inside the bars service, and we're just gonna say for a given bar, return this.http.get, and for each item, let's create another interface called bar item, and here, actually, bar menu item, and we'll do beer, manufacturer, the price, and the number of likes. And we'll do get bar item, API menu plus bar name, or just bar. Bar menu item, sorry. And now with this created, we can go back to the bar details component and also say, along with getting the bar, bar service dot get menu. So this dot bar name dot subscribe, and for the given data, we'll do this menu dot data. Okay, and we'll need this. Additionally, we can just copy the error over since it's pretty much the same thing. And actually, if we have the error once, we don't really need it again. So we'll just kind of hide this. Now let's see what that looks like. So if I go to Blue Angel, okay, well, nothing so far. And the reason why is we forgot to, or rather I forgot to have the table for the menu. So under bar details, we'll need to now add a menu. To do that, let's go ahead and have another container element to center the content. And we'll have an h2 saying menu. And since we're using Bootstrap, this is where it gets nice. We can use Bootstrap's built-in classes to do things like centering the text. So let me show you what it looks like without the CSS classes that I'm about to add. It just looks like this. Now I'm going to center the text. Then I want to change the font to be lighter. And it already starts to look a little bit nicer than having that thick font that we had before. And now we can have the table. Oh, forgot the E. And for the value, I'm just going to say it's a menu. And we can start to have the rest of the content. And now here's what it looks like. So Blue Angel sells 2 beers. And if we were to go to another one like Caravan, there's also 2 beers. Budweiser happens to be liked by 2 people in our system. If we go to another one like AP Stump, let me see, one that might be selling more than just 1 or 2 beers. Headley Club is selling nothing. And 7 Bamboo, also just 1 beer. Okay. So never mind. I'm not going to show an example with 5 beers, I guess. And similarly to how we did clicking on the bar name to get to here, we can have clicking on the beer name to get to the beer information. So I already put that in here, /beers and then item.beer, but we don't have the route for that. So clicking on this will actually do nothing right now except throw an error in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly just create the component for beers. It's the same idea as getting details for the bar, except we'll probably also have something along the lines of showing who likes a given beer. So if I click on the beer's name, I want to see who likes the beer and also which bar sells the beer or what price it may be for. So to do that, ng generate component, beer details. And we'll also need a beer service. So ng generate service beers. Now within the beers service, we'll need a couple functions. The first is just going to be getting which bars are selling the beer. So to do that, we'll need this, and also say HTTP client, not that one, this one. And the beer location is going to be something like this. The name of the bar, the price, which will be a number, and the customers. So how many customers are at that bar? This happens to be a slightly more complicated query than your generic select from where. Now, for the beer details component, let's go in there, and similarly to before, beer service, and we'll also need to have the activated route. So private route, activated route, so that way we know just which beer we're dealing with here. And now we can just do this.route, param map, .subscribe, and then say param map has some beer name, which we're going to get by doing param map.get and then beer. Oh, beer name, string. I'll need to have a semicolon there. And one crucial thing, I also need the route. So for beers/beer, we'll go to the beer details component. And once we have this information, we should be able to do a beer service dot get bars selling, this dot beer name, and whatever we have, we can just say for whatever data response we get back, this dot beer locations has data. So now when we click Budweiser, we're not seeing any HTML yet, but it actually goes somewhere. And for the HTML, same idea as before, except I'm also going to have one little twist. We'll have a manufacturer section. So we want to know who is this beer made by. And for that, we'll have another function under the beer details to get the manufacturer. Which will look something like this. So if the beer is there, then get beer manufacturer, beer. Otherwise, I just want a list of all the manufacturers. So it's similar to how we handle the bar. And so for this, so it will be something like this. It will be a string name, and then we just make the request, get the data, and show it here. And now, when we do this, here's what it looks like. Budweiser made by something I can't pronounce. Oh, there's Busch in here. But our ultimate goal was really showing, okay, well, who sells the beer, right? So to do that, we'll need to have another container like in the bar details section. And we'll have different things like how many locations have the beer, and also filtering the different bars and things like that. So let's see what this looks like. Sold at beer locations, which was our list, capital L. And if it exists, I want to show the length. Next up, I'll actually want to make this a font weight light, and I'll attach some special CSS to this. So I'll say it's a result count CSS class, and go into our CSS here and customize the font details myself. So that'll be a result count, font weight, well, actually font size, 1.25 rem. And with that, it looks a little bit nicer. It's a little bit larger font. And then we can have a table for all the different locations. So let's have a line and then all the locations. Couple important things to take out from here. In the table, I have beard locations, but I also have sort mode, and I have a sort field. So we'll be able to sort by the price, which I'll get to in a bit. Next, we go to the body. Within the price table cell, I have this pipe over here, and that's actually how it's referred to in Angular. So I'm saying that whatever this value is, just carry it over and process it using some special pipe, which is called currency. And it does exactly what you might expect. It transforms something like having 2.5 into something like saying a dollar symbol and then 2.50. That's what the pipe does. And if you're familiar with Linux and using pipes in Linux, it's a similar idea. You have something which is output from here, and you pass it directly into this other program or script, anything, and then whatever the output is, that's what you'll get. Okay, so now let's figure out how to do the sorting. This is where now you'll be introduced to a drop-down component. So similar to how we did the table, we'll need to go back and import the drop-down component. So let's go into app.module.ts and do this. Import drop-down module. And this drop-down module will also need to be imported within the imports list or imports array here. And now we can start to use the drop-down. So going back to beer details, we'll insert the drop-down right within our header. So we'll want to get it here eventually. P-drop-down, and a couple things, float right and text left. Additionally, we only want to do this if we have some special filter options, which I will create on the component. And we'll need to give a list of the different options. So again, filter options. And whenever the value changes here, which we can capture using the onChange event, and note that it's surrounded by parentheses. That's because it's an event. Events are surrounded by parentheses in Angular. And then sort by, which is another function we'll have to create, event.value. All of this information can be found by going to the PrimeNG documentation and looking for the drop-down component. So under drop-down, when you go to events, there's an onChange, which is a callback to invoke when value of drop-down changes, which is exactly that. When the value changes, I want to capture it. So we'll provide a callback function for Angular to execute. And event.value happens to be where we show the selected value, or rather where we get the selected value. Now, to actually include all these components, we'll need to go into the, or to include all those functions and properties, we'll need to go into the beer details component and create everything. So the first thing will be creating the filter options. And the type we'll get from here, from PrimeNG select item, right? So that's going to be under components, common select item. And now we can say just select item. So it's going to be a list of select item. And here's what that would look like. This filter options is a list with a label property and a value property. Oh, and make sure that the keys here are also surrounded in quotes, so they're strings. And then we can, all right, so now we have the filter options and we still need that sort by function. So that will look something like this. Where given some selected option, we'll check if the selected option matches one of these. And if so, we'll handle accordingly, such as by sorting by the customer's value or the price, so on and so forth. We'll also need to make sure that we have the sort field and that sort order property. Okay, so now if we go to our application, as you can see, we have this nice looking drop down over here. And here, let me just make sure. Huh. So here we have an error saying that there's no animation module. So we'll just copy this and make sure it's imported into our application. The browser animations module will actually be located within another import. So that'll be at Angular / platform browser / animations, I believe. Let's see. Browser animations module. Okay. Now when this refreshes, our dropdown should be working and great. All right, so here's what it looks like. And when we do high prices first, it sorts greatest to least, most frequented first, so on and so forth. And mind you, this is all right on the UI. It doesn't make any special call to the server side to do the sorting. Everything's right here. And if you click on any any bar name, then we go back there. So 7 Bamboo, Shark and Rose, so on and so forth. Oh, this one has 3 bars, and then Blue Angel. So there you have it. Now, what if you wanted to just go and show a list of all of the beers? You would need a separate page for that, right? So let's change this features item to a different page called beers. First thing first, we'll need to go in and make sure that we have the beers component. So ng generate component beers. And I'll also go into the beers service and get a list of all the beers. Next up, within the beers component, let's have getting all the beers. So beers.component.ts, and we'll need to do private beer service. And with this alone, we can already start to show all the different beers. So something like this. We'll also need to go into the app.component and change this to say beers. And let's make it so that whenever this page is being visited, we actually get that specific page with the highlighting. So router link bars, and whenever the router link is active, attach that active class. That's how you do the highlighting. So router link, in this case, beers, and this won't be necessary. Okay. So now we have a beers page, and we'll still need to have the routing done. That's what we're missing. So path beers, okay, and there you have it. Notice on this one, we actually have pagination. To do that, you'll need to go into the code and add a couple properties to the beers table. It's just the paginator needs to be true, and rows, you can set it to 10, 20, 50, even 100. And with that, we have pagination within our tables. So instead of having an endless list, you can just let the user go to a different page right within the table. And for that, now, similarly to how we did the filtering based on the sort order, or rather we had a drop down for the sort order, we're going to have a filter for whatever manufacturer you want to filter by. So to do that, we just need to add this. So here's what we've done. It's the standard Jumbotron we've been doing, and then we have a p-dropdown ngIf where we're going to have manufacturer options. And to get the manufacturer options, we'll need to do this. So let's create the manufacturer options. Manufacturer options, which is again select item, and we'll need to preserve the original list when we do the filtering, or our own custom filtering. So we'll just have this as well. And now what ends up happening is we get the options, we create the list dynamically, and they'll be there. To filter, we'll need to do a filter function. So filter beers, it will get the manufacturer, load all the beers up, and after that just filter down to the ones we need. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Oh, looks like p-dropdown is not found. So for that, what we need to do is make sure that we have the forms module also imported. App.module. Should look probably something like this. Forms module. And it's imported from @angular/forms. This is what provides the ng model directive, which we'll be using. And now we have this dropdown. So we can filter, we can get rid of the X, and whatever else we want to do over there. I highly recommend you play around with the dropdown component and make sure you understand the different options. Look through the documentation and see what you can do. In order to do that X in the dropdown, there's this show clear attribute or property that we can set. The ng class is another directive. What it allows us to do is say if a certain property is true, or if a certain condition is true, attach the CSS class. In this case, that CSS doesn't actually do anything because I have not actually added that in there. But if I had it, it would be there. Okay, so with that now, you have used the dropdown module, you have the table module from PrimeNG, and you've used the components from both. Along with that, now you should also know routing a little bit. Now, one last major thing will be the high charts. That's what you can use in order to create the different charts for your application. What that will mean is, let's say you want to show a bar chart or a any graph, anything like that. Well, as long as you can get the data from the server side, which now you should know how to do using the queries and returning the data from your API, you'll need to kind of generate the chart somehow. So let's create another component called insights. Or just insight. And what we're going to do is get all of the bars and how many people go to each bar. So within the bar service, we're going to have another function called getFrequentCounts. And I've already created the query for that on the server side. So if we go to database.py, getBarFrequentCounts is over here, and within the init I should also have the frequency data route. So that's how we'll be doing this. So frequency data, and let me show you what that looks like, okay? So within the insight, I'm going to get the bar service, and do get frequent counts, and whenever that data comes in, I'll just put it into the console for you to explore, or just to show you at first. We'll also need to make sure that we add the route to the routing module. So insight, insight component, And now, when we go into the inside component, we have this. So one last thing though, of course, app.component, we'll need to have the menu item for the insight page, which we're creating right now. And this one will be called insight. Okay. So when we go to insight, it just says insight works, but within the console here, there's an array, and it just shows for each item, there's a bar name and a frequent count. That's what we'll use in order to generate our bar graph. Now, to generate the bar graph, we'll first need to get HighCharts installed. So let's go back to your terminal, make sure you're within the UI folder, and do npm install save, and make sure you have HighCharts. Now we'll also need to make sure that we have HighCharts being included within the angular.json file. So from within the angular.json file, make sure you add the appropriate JavaScript and styles. It'll look something like this for the JavaScript. And here's the CSS for HighCharts. Of course, since we modified the angular.json file, we'll need to restart the ngserve command. And now we're ready to use the HighCharts. So let's go back to the insight.html, and we can replace this with a container. I'll just have an empty line, and after that, let's create a div element where we'll have an ID called bar graph. Right now, if we go to the insight page, there's not really anything there because there's no text, but we don't need any. We're just going to create that graph. So from the insight.component.ts file, we'll need to add a couple things. First, let's declare a constant called HighCharts. This is just so TypeScript doesn't complain to us repeatedly that, oh, there's no HighCharts, there's no HighCharts. And next, let's create a render chart function. It's going to take a list of bars and their counts as two separate but parallel lists. And we'll use HighCharts.chart. First will be a string which corresponds to the ID of the DOM element you want to replace. And then we'll need to say it's a chart with a type column. There's a title, which we'll call frequenting count at bars, right? And then for the x-axis configurations, we'll say categories. We're going to refer to the bars list that we're getting as a parameter. For the title, it's going to be just bar. So for that axis, it'll be labeled bar. Then for the y-axis, we'll need to have a minimum of 0. The title will be number of customers, and for if there's any labels that are too much, we'll just justify and make sure it works out, hopefully. And for plot options, let's also make sure that the bar has the data labels enabled. What that means is when you hover over each bar, we'll have the data labels there, so you can see, oh, okay, here's the actual count, rather than trying to follow the line and see from there. We'll turn the legend off though, so enabled is false, and I realized this should be enabled, not enables. And then credits, we'll also turn that off. And now for the data. In order to plug the data in, there's this series option or property, and within there, the first element of that list should be counts. And with that, we have a function to generate our chart. So let's plug the data in and see what happens. We'll need to transform the data first though, so let's make sure we have a bars list and the counts list. And what I'm going to do is just have a for each loop that says for every bar, or for each bar, the bars list should have the bar included, and the counts list should have the bar dot frequent count. See, the IDE did not help me with this because we don't have that interface defined. But if you look within the SQL query inside the code sample, then you'll see that, okay, here are the column names and what the property would be. Or if you go to the developer tools and look here, you can see it right here, bar and frequent count. That's where I'm getting this from. And once we're done constructing those two lists, we just say render chart, bars, and counts. All right, so let's see what that looks like now. And there you have it, a bar graph. Haha, okay, excuse the pun, but yeah. Okay, so with that, this comes to a close. We have how to generate your bar graphs, how to do routing, how to filter, how to do the sorting. So here's the filtering. We have the sorting working as well. So if you go to a given beer, like Budweiser, you can sort. And so to do that, now you have a table, you have the different drop downs, and most of all, this UI looks nicer than just using basic HTML. You had to use minimal custom CSS. I had maybe, 2-3 lines maybe. That's it. The rest of it is actually provided by Bootstrap. So yeah, I hope this was a helpful tutorial, and I highly encourage you learn some basic HTML, CSS, and perhaps JavaScript at the very least, in order to do well on this project. It will certainly make your life a lot easier if you do that before you do this, but the sample code will be available for you for this demo application, and you'll be able to see just how I went about creating everything. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and that will be all. All right, thank you for watching this series.